Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. A little later in the program, we're going to take a look at your senator, Mr. Udall, who said, well, something about Obamacare. We'll see if it's true or not. Stay tuned for that. But first, do you remember debtor's prison? You played Monopoly and you ran out of money and they would put you in jail? I thought that was illegal. It's not. Apparently, it's very legal. How cool is that? From the ACLU, Denise Maes, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it.
What was debtor's prison? Let's just.
It's kind of self-explanatory, really, just the way you said it, just putting people in prison for their failure to pay a debt.
A private debt, a public debt, taxes, whatever?
Either, right. It could be public or private, but typically in the era that you're talking about, it was public and private debt.
Is that what they used to call the poorhouse?
Exactly.
So were there actually debtors' prisons, or is it just people in prison and they just happened to be there because they didn't pay their bills?
Well, there were so many of them that it got its own little wing, so to speak, or its own name, and it was debtors' prison. And
they were the deadbeats.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Damn deadbeats. All right, so why has that changed? I mean, if somebody has a contract and the contract is not fulfilled, or someone is sued, or there's a judgment against somebody, and that person doesn't pay that judgment, why is that an improper punishment? Thank you.
Yeah. Well, first of all, because what we're looking at is jail time is something that is unique to criminal offenses, first of all. And what we have found, at least in a limited investigation, although extensive enough to give us cause for concern, is there are individuals that are being jailed for their inability to pay a court fine. And they're being put in a jail for their inability to pay a court fine for a non-jailable offense. And that, to me, is a serious problem. And there isn't even an interest in the court of determining whether or not this individual can pay.
Let's go backward. The ACLU did a fascinating study, and I'm just drawn to this because I thought the idea of putting people in jail because they couldn't pay their bills, I thought we had protections that couldn't happen. I mean, you can evict them if they don't pay their rent. You can foreclose on their house if they don't pay their mortgage.
Exactly.
You can take their stuff away if they have a loan out for that stuff, and you can repossess it. You can garnish their wages. You can take whatever out of their bank account. You can do all these things, but I didn't know you could actually stick them in jail.
Well, I mean, of course, the ACLU's position is that you can't, that it remains unconstitutional, but it's still happening. And we found this in some metropolitan cities, for example, Westminster, Wheat Ridge, Thornton, other areas where they put people in jail for their inability to pay a fine, and the municipal judges think that's perfectly appropriate. We contend that it's not.
Let's go through an example. Give me something here. So you looked at 3 municipalities. There are people who are in jail because they wouldn't. What kind of fine are we talking about?
The fine can range, and incidentally, just to clarify, I mean, our review of this practice was actually broader than these 3 municipalities, but the reason why we focused on these 3 is because they did seem to have a pretty blatant overuse of this particular hammer, if you will. But for example, we have found individuals whose only offense was a dog off leash. And so they get a citation, they get a warrant, they have to go to court, and even if they were to pay off their citation, there's actually court fines that are put on top of that. What would normally be the fine for having a dog off leash. So the court will put a fine on top of that to pay for the court fees.
All right, let me see if I'm tracking with you.
Sure.
So I take my dog out, and which I don't have a dog because I'm a Republican. I hate all animals, don't you know? But if I had a dog, I take it out, it's off leash, and park ranger comes up, or a police officer, he needs to be on a leash. Here's a ticket. It's a $20 ticket, whatever it is.
Correct.
If I don't pay that $20, I can get hauled in front of court.
Right.
And then not only do I owe the $20, but I also owe court costs because running a court is expensive.
Yes.
And so then I have to pay the $20 plus the court costs.
Correct.
And if I don't have it, or if I don't want to pay it, what do they do?
Well, in some of these municipalities, that's exactly what we found they were doing is putting them in jail.
How do they figure out? Let's say I have $100 worth of fines, and I'm not paying the fines. how much time do I need to spend in jail in order to pay off $100 worth of fines? Is there some sort of formula?
Yes, I mean, I think the courts would argue that there is a formula, and it depends, and it varies. For example, if the typical cost of a jail per day is $30 a day in Westminster, then $30 divided by 100, that's how much time you would spend. I mean, they have their own way.
I'm not following this.
I appreciate that.
So if it costs $30 a day to keep me in jail, and I have $100 I need to work off, they're going to put me in for 3 or 4 days.
Correct. And counties have a way, they know how much their beds cost on a per day basis, and so they allocate it according to how much of a fine is owed.
All right, I might not be the brightest bulb here, so let me see if I can do the arithmetic.
You're doing great, John.
All right, so I owe them $100. They're not getting it.
Right.
So they're going to put me in jail, which is going to cost them $30 a day for at least 3 days, maybe 4, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And so not only do they not get the $100 that I owe them, but I can clean the slate by them paying another $100.
Exactly.
So it seems to me it's a $200 loss to the city for doing it.
That's exactly right. I mean, you have you've captured the logic of the entire thing completely. Not only do we argue that it's unconstitutional and shouldn't be done at all, but it's senseless and it's wasteful.
After my 4 days in jail, is the record clean? Am I a free man? Is it paid? Am I free to go? I've done my debt. Paid my debt to society.
That's unclear. It's unclear, but what we have found in our investigation is that that does seem to be true. So there isn't later seeking you out for any more penalties or fines. They do seem to just let you go, although there is no order that says, okay, all is well and good and you're fine. But that does seem to be the end result.
All right. Give me a sense of scale on this. You know, is this just one guy who refused to pay his late fee on the library book, and he's a crotchety old man, and he's going to prove that he returned it, but there's no proof, and he's going to make a statement? Are there thousands of people wasting away in Debtor's Prison in Wheat Ridge with tin cups on the?
Well, I wouldn't say that the scale is that enormous, but it's enough to cause pause. For example, in some particular municipalities, we have found within a 6-month period, there'll be 200 failure to pay warrants that are issued to put people in jail for failure to pay fines.
Over what period?
So over a 6-month period. So, you calculate that by the number of beds that they're going to allocate times whatever price that is. That's a heck of a lot of money that taxpayers are wasting.
Listen, you're with the ACLU. I know you don't give a damn about money. I'm a conservative. I actually care about money. You're into human rights or what other silly crap you're
civil
into.
Liberties,
civil
yes.
liberties. All I want to do is stop spending tax money. Is there? Give me an idea. What's the average length of time that these people have to spend in jail?
It varies, but what we found in, again, the communities that we focused on is it can be anywhere from 5 to 10 days. And let me, you said something about the taxpayer piece, and which rang a bell in my head that I think you'll also be interested in knowing is Denver used to issue failure to pay warrants on a pretty regular basis until the end of 2011. And in 2012, what they realized is that they had collected more fines and court costs than they had in 2011, simply by no longer putting people in jail. What they did was they allowed people payment plans. In some cases, they did reduced fines so that it would match the person's ability to pay. And so they found their fine collection and fee collection, cost collection, to actually go higher.
But there's also a lot of administration with that. Why is it wrong to put somebody in jail if they refuse to pay their bills?
We're not talking about people that refuse to pay. We're talking about people who cannot pay.
Everybody can pay. A good bookie has a guy who can lean on you and break a few thumbs and get your money.
Well, I think that the part of the problem, as we've had, is that the courts aren't even doing that inquiry. Can you pay? They're simply saying, you didn't. Okay, we'll put you in jail instead. As opposed to having some sort of a hearing or some sort of an opportunity for the defendant to say, I can't, Your Honor.
Does this go on somebody's, obviously it's on their record.
Correct.
Is it a felony or is it a misdemeanor?
It's more than likely a misdemeanor.
All right. In other words, does this hurt a person's chance to get a job later on, to do all these other things?
Sure, because it certainly is going to be on their record.
All right, so what I'm hearing so far is we put people in jail for things they can't pay. We spend a lot of tax money on that. And if the average stay is 5 days,
5 to 10 days, right?
You're talking $150 times hundreds of people in one municipality.
Correct.
All right. Let's talk the legalities of this. You told me it looks unconstitutional. Why do you say that? What's in the state constitution, and why is it done then?
That's a good question. Well, the state constitution pretty clearly says that one cannot be put in prison for debt. So that's pretty explicit. What we have, unfortunately, is a Colorado statute that read in very general and broad, in a very broad way, would seem to permit judges to do this action, which is what we presume some courts are relying on. We also look at due process requirements under the Constitution, and it seems like due process would at a minimum require some sort of inquiry into whether or not you have an ability to pay. And that's also being ignored in this process.
All right, let me play the evil Republican role one more time, which is, fine, they don't pay, you put them in jail. But why can't I do that for private debts? If somebody owes me money, why is it that I can't see them go to jail or somehow get punished that way, but the government can? Where's the equity?
Well, I think we're talking about civil versus criminal laws, and that's very different. A contractual arrangement between the two of us clearly doesn't have the government oversight that says, if you breach your contract, I'm going to imprison you, sir. I mean, that's clearly something that's utilized in the public safety reasons. The government runs that. It's state run. We let the state and the government run those sort of public safety institutions. Private dealings, I don't think, ought to be overseen by the government and have the power to imprison you for your failure to pay me on a contract.
Then why is it I can go to jail for failure to pay taxes? Now that's a pretty common one, and isn't that exactly the same thing? The feds put people in jail for failure to pay taxes or tax evasion. So why is the ACLU going to get as involved in that as they're in this?
We don't have any plans to do that, but I think the distinction here is that is a public debt. It's a debt to a government entity, and Congress has already declared that to be a federal law. Whereas here we're talking about a situation where an individual is actually being jailed for a non-jailable offense. Now, in some cases, it is a jailable offense. I'll grant you that. I'm not talking exclusively about non-jailable offenses, but some certainly are. So you're being put in jail, which and you simply can't pay, and it's something as simple as a dog off leash. I mean, that to me is a very big distinction.
Completely depends upon the type of dog you have. Denise, thank you so much.
That's probably true.
I appreciate it. I hope the legislature takes a look at it soon.
We're hoping. We have a representative that is interested in it, and we hope to have a bill in front of the legislature and get it done.
Denise, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Stay tuned.